Well, the Conservative Party broke some fundraising records in 2023. Elections Canada says the Conservative raised a record $35.2 million in donations last year. That's more than double the $15.6 million brought in by the governing Liberal Party and 5 times what the NDP raised last year. Health Minister Mark Holland says the Conservatives are capitalizing on Canadians' fear.
Holding a mirror to people's anger and just making them more worked up, pushing into their wounds, into their fear, has great profit in it. And the Conservatives have been enormously successful in exploiting that.
Well, what do these fundraising numbers tell us about how the next campaign may be framed? Because there's some time and there's some money. And we're going to bring in the power panel on that. Rob Benzie is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communications strategist. Leah Ward is a former Director of Communications for Alberta NDP Premier Rachel Notley. And here with me is Tim Powers, a former strategist for Conservative parties. So
Tim, you got 3 has-beens and you and Benzie's, is that it?
That's right. Well, you know, all right, Tim, thank you for that contribution. Let's start with you. This is a lot of money. And like I know the Conservatives spend more money on fundraising than the other parties do. And they have a more activated political base, typically, than the other parties do. There are limits on what you can spend during a campaign, but no limits on what they can spend between now and the campaign. So just what kind of a competitive advantage does this sort of cash give a party that's out in front?
Let me put it in a context that I think everybody who watches television, particularly sports television, will understand right now. Even Amanda, because she's had some great sport analogies recently. You think the gambling ads, the online gambling ads, you're going to see a lot of them, and you have seen a lot of them. Yeah. Poilievre now has the ability to almost match that buy, right? To buy as many ads as he wants to curate about his image. I think there's a new one, or one that was new to me, with Pierre and the Puzzle that's out there right now. Again, trying to depict him in a frame that he's comfortable with before the Liberals do that. That's a huge advantage, and I think you've seen the benefits of that. I mean, the criticism over the fall, many of the criticisms that have been directed at the Liberals, one of them is, why haven't you punched back? Why have you let them have the free run of the airwaves? And that's going to continue. That money allows you to do that. It also allows you to engage in a space where the Conservatives seem to be doing very well, and that's various social media platforms. And what that does isn't just advertising, it cultivates data, which is so vital in this day and age. So it's a huge advantage.
So, Amanda, we know coming out of the cabinet retreat and what we heard from the Prime Minister when he spoke to caucus last week, that they're trying to frame this is the year of the choice, right? To lay out the stark choice they see between Canadian voters. And that means defining Pierre Poilievre in a way that his negatives go up. The war chest on one side to dirt up his reputation compared to the war chest on the other side are nowhere near even. So how do the Liberals adapt to that?
This is such a big challenge. I mean, if you haven't had enough of Pierre Poilievre in his tight T-shirts from the last campaign, then brace yourself, because more is coming. And they telegraphed this in the fall, right? They said, we're going to spend a lot more dollars on Pierre's public image, his profile, building it with Canadians. And the Liberals responded in kind, saying, and this has been really the criticism of the party and the desire of the members and those who support the Liberals, is, when are we going on the attack, right? We watched the Conservatives roll out these long form 15-minute policy videos. We watched them spend $3 million on Pierre Poilievre's rehabilitation campaign to make him more relatable. And then Liberals really haven't responded in kind yet. So when you see a gap of this magnitude, like a $15 million discrepancy between the two parties, it's extremely alarming, because those are ad dollars and ad buys. And those ad buys mean how many times you're going to see an ad, how many times you're going to consume one over social media or over broadcast. And they are just going to outspend the Liberals at this point. So they're going to have to get super clever with how they get their message out. So
Leah, it's not just more than the Liberals. It's more than the Liberals and the NDP combined by almost $13 million. What does that tell us about the political landscape and the ability of two of the big national parties, to the left, to compete with the big one on the right?
I mean, when we're looking at the numbers, there's not a lot of loss from both the NDP and the Liberals. So I mean, there's some comfort to those parties, in that sense. But yeah, I mean, the panel, I think there's some consensus here, right? Like, that much money is a tremendous advantage particularly outside of an election period where there are no spending limits and they can fill the airwaves, particularly in paid media. They have a tremendous ability to understand what drives engagements and interactions in digital media and in social media. And with this kind of money, the potential for the Conservatives is, I'd be very nervous if I were the Liberals. The only perhaps I don't know comfort they could take is in Alberta. The Alberta NDP out fundraised the UCP for a full every quarter for an entire year, and even partially in 2021. So partially for 2021, all of 2022, nearly doubled their fundraising numbers, and still lost the election by a hair. So it's not all money. What you do with it matters, but unfortunately for the Liberals, what they do, they're very effective, and so I think this is bad news.
So Benzie, it's not just the high-level dollar amounts, right? It's the number of people it's coming from. There's 200,000 small donors to the Conservatives, just 38,000 for the Liberals. Now, that's always been kind of that way with the Conservatives. They have this highly motivated, consistent, monthly donor base. But what does that tell us about, where the Conservative movement is and what the other parties might need to do to try to even try to match that?
I mean, it's very difficult, David, for the other parties to motivate their bases in this way. And those 200,000 donors, those are 200,000 voters as well. I mean, if you're going to write a check to a political party, chances are you're also going to walk through the snow or whatever in October 2025 and cast a ballot for that party. So I think if I'm Mr. Poilievre, I'm very excited about that. Now, to Leah's point, the party that raises the most money doesn't always win. And this is the comfort that I think that the Liberals would find, small comfort as it may be. The record that Mr. Poilievre's party set last year eclipsed a record that they had set in 2018. And they lost the 2019 and the 2021 elections despite out fundraising the Liberals. Now, they're doing even better than they've ever done before. And Mr. Poilievre's slick ad campaign last summer, I think, was effective. I think we're going to see a lot of ads this year, and not just on sort of boutique channels. We're going to see it during major sports games. I don't know if they'll have a Super Bowl ad this year, but we're going to see it in hockey playoffs, things like that, where Canadians are really engaged, and they're not zooming through taped programming or anything like that. So that's why it's to Tim's point, it's very important to raise these big dollars if you want to advertise in a mass way like that.
And it also adds a nimbleness, which is important, right? It's not the big ads and or the regional ads. It's even very specific local ads. Give you an example. In Atlantic Canada, 5 years ago, you would have never heard in a pre-writ period radio ads, Conservative-specific issue radio ads. They're buying radio ads in seats they're hoping to win. The Liberals and the NDP don't have the resources to do that or even defend the base that they have. Those little actions and activities that cost much less can have a bigger impact in flipping a seat here, there, and that's what they're trying to do with this too. The local spend is fascinating. In a very ironic way, the Conservatives don't want the government to invest in the media, but they're doing a ton of investing in the media right now. But they are helping local markets. The ad buys are in heavy rotation.
I have seen Conservative ads on this channel, which is a fascinating thing to see. But Amanda, on that point, I mean, the way they're operating now, the Conservatives, they're in a campaign until voting day, right? I mean, Pierre Poilievre is traveling around the country. This money allows for that to happen. It allows for them to hire staff. And as Tim was saying, where the Liberals might have to focus on a big national thematic strategic buy, they have this capacity now to do the nimble, tactical switch and pivots on issue by issue and riding by riding in some cases.
For sure. And I would argue that they've been in campaign mode since Poilievre was elected leader. That's been their style of communications from go. The other thing that they have the ability to do, which we don't talk about as often, is deeper research, better focus groups. So they can get into the pockets of the country where very specific messaging will resonate and matter, and they can deliver that messaging at a higher frequency to those areas. And honestly, the other parties just won't have the funds to go that deep. not just on the buy itself, but also on the research. What do people want to hear? What are they really moved by? And they're going to have the ability to go much deeper in that area, which I think can give them an advantage in pockets of the country that the Liberals and the NDP won't be able to touch in the same way.
So Leah, the secret sauce for the Liberals in the last couple of campaigns has been, in some ways, the industry of their leader on the campaign trail. I mean, Justin Trudeau's long days, multiple cities, multiple provinces, he doesn't seem to get tired. Other leaders haven't been able to match that. Poilievre definitely has that level of stamina and capacity. He has the freedom as the opposition leader to do that now. How does Jagmeet Singh respond to that? How does Mr. Blanchet respond to that in Quebec? And how do the Liberals, who are prisoners of governing, how do they respond to that?
Yeah, without the money, it's pretty tough to compete. So if touring is possible and getting into, like, I think the only way to fight against this type of massive war chest and machinery that's being collected behind Pierre Poilievre is to look at micro-targeting areas where you think you can have a competitive edge. And so if it means putting the leader in smaller communities where they get direct access and one-to-one time with voters, that's probably a good defense against a massive air war that you just can't compete against. But at the end of the day, it's going to be tough for them.
Benzie, just as a guy who knows Ontario and Toronto really well, it's always been little thin margins of vote efficiency that have done it for the Liberals. Not always been, but that's been a key part of them holding on to the Fortress GTA. Basically because their data in some ways has been better. To Amanda's point, this maybe lets the Conservatives really kind of close the gap there, right? And what impact do you see this happening on Fortress GTA for the Liberals potentially?
I think it's going to be the thing to watch in the next election, David, because yes, the Conservatives have a sophisticated voter identification system. They are very good at it. I know because the provincial Conservatives are really, really good at it. Now, there's not a lot of crossover among the parties, but there are some similarities in terms of the technology that they use and the vendors that they use. And I think that's something that I'd be watching very closely because they're very good at getting their voter to the poll. So I think, but I mean, the problem for the Tories is that it's a dominoes kind of theory here in Ontario, right? You either win 30 seats or you win 90 seats. It's hard to or 80 seats. It's hard to win 50 or 60. It doesn't seem to they don't seem to get those breaks somehow. And if Jagmeet Singh has a good campaign, that could help the Tories in a bunch of ridings in Ontario. If he has a bad campaign, as he did last time, that helps the Liberals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the key thing for the Conservatives in Ontario is to win more seats than everybody else. If they win the majority of seats, stack that on with the West and everything else, they probably come out on top.